Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Tzadi Gimel discusses the situation in which two or more people perform a malacha together. They're sharing in the action. The question is, who is considered to be violating the Isser? Is it both, or is it neither, or is it one of them? So we are going to have the Daf of threes. We're going to have three cases, three opinions, and three primary lines of questioning regarding the sugya. At the end of the Daf, we'll have a Mishnah which will take us to a different subject, that being the subject of what happens when you have a kli which is carrying something which is insignificant. Does the kli become subservient to that object or not? But first of all, this discussion of when you have different people doing the same Isser together. Now, this is not just a question as regards to Hilchos Shabbos. Anytime you have people or objects which join together to do something, who is responsible for it? When they're sharing the burden, who is responsible for it? So we're going to have three cases here primarily. So the issue which we'll use as our example is when you have two people carrying an object together on Shabbos. So the first case is where either of them could have carried it alone. The fact that they're sharing it is completely abnormal, and they're each sharing a one-man job. The second case is where it's a two-man job, and each one is doing a full job. It requires two men to do the job. And the third case is where one of them could have performed the whole job on his own, and the other one could not. Okay, now what's the halacha here? Three opinions. Rabbi Meir says it's an Isser D'Oraisa in all cases. All these cases count as an Isser. It doesn't matter if you're sharing or not sharing. It's all an Isser. Now, that's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, in a case where each one could have done it on his own, there's no reason for them to be sharing it. That's not an Isser D'Oraisa, that's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. In a case where they could have, in a case where you need each one to work together, or one of them could not do it on his own, either one or both could not do the job on his own, there is definitely an Isser D'Oraisa here. In the last case, it's not clear exactly how. Now, Reb Shimon says, no, the only case in which you have an Isser D'Oraisa is if one person could have done the entire thing on his own and the other person could not. And one of the lines of question which we'll get to is which one? Which is the one that has the Isser D'Oraisa? So first of all, the Gemara wants to find out, and this is our first line of discussion, we want to find out what exactly is the source for these three opinions. So the Gemara says it comes from how you read the pasuk which describes the Chayav Chatas, and it says V'im nefesh achas techta b'shkaga me'am ha'aretz ba'asayis achas me'mitzvahs Hashem asher lo yisei asana. So it uses a singular form three times here. The Gemara is going to have three drushes. It says nefesh achas. That's nefesh is one soul, achas is one, and it says ba'asayso, when it, or when he will do it, that action. So you have three different indications that it has to be one person, not joined with anyone else. And the question is, what are these three things for? Rabbi Yehuda will say one of the exclusions apply because Rabbi Yehuda holds there is one case in which there is no Chayav Chatos, and Rabbi Shimon will say two of the exclusions apply. Now, first of all, let's have a brisa here. And the brisa describes to us how these opinions play out. So first of all, the brisa brings three examples of malachos that are performed in a situation where it's a one-man job, but two people are doing the job. So the case here is you have two people stacking fruits with a pitchfork. That's a one-man job. It's also malach of ma'amer. You have two people writing with one pen, or two people carrying one reed. Another case is if they were jointly straightening the strings in a weaving. All these things are one-man jobs being performed by two people, and that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon both say there is no Isser. There is no Isser D'Oraisa. There's no obligation to bring a Karban Chatas. However, they disagree in a case where it's a two-man job being performed together. And the examples here are they're carrying a big container of figs or a long piece of wood. So on that, Rabbi Yehuda says it's a two-man job. So each one is doing a normal activity. Each one is doing a full man's job. Rabbi Shimon says no, it's still called a shared job. A shared job still doesn't count as an Isser D'Oraisa. Now, what is their proof? The proof is from the pasuk which we quoted earlier, which the Brisa now brings in. And the understanding is as follows. The pasuk says that it has to be that one person does the Isser, not if two people do the Isser. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you have one exclusion, and that excludes a case where it's a one-man job. It's being done by two people. That's called a shared job. Rabbi Shimon says, no, even if it's a two-man job, and each person is doing a full man's work, it's still a shared job. It's a job which they are doing it together. Now, how do the exclusions work? So again, there were three exclusions. So everyone agrees that one of the exclusions applies to a case where two people carried it together, but not at the same time. One person performed the akira, he picked up the object from at rest, and the other one took control over it and did the hanacha. So that's one exclusion that everybody agrees. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon, the two other exclusions are for these two cases. One is where it was a one-man job, and therefore it's shared and it's excluded from the Chiyuv Chatas. And the other is where it's a two-man job, it's still called shared and excluded from the Chiyuv Chatas. Rabbi Yehuda says no. There's only one exclusion, and that one exclusion is for the case where it is a one-man job, and it's called shared and excluded from the Chiyuv Chatas. If, however, it's a two-man job, that's not excluded. The last third exclusion is meant to exclude something else. That's to exclude a case where somebody was told by the Sanhedrin that you can do this, and he went ahead and he did it. He doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas for that. Now, Reb Shimon says you don't need exclusion for that case, because in that case you do have to bring a carbon chatas. That's a wrong halacha. Now, Rabbi Meir, who says that a person is chayav chatas for all these three cases, we'll say that the three exclusions are for three different things. One is for the case of the Sanhedrin. One is for the case of where one person did the akira, one person did the hanacha. And the third exclusion does not exist. There are only two exclusions, because it doesn't say nefesh techta, achas techta, asoisa techta. Just says nefesh achas together. That only counts as one exclusion. Gemara now begins a new line of discussion. We had said that all the opinions agree that in a case where one person could have done the job completely himself and the second person could not, everybody agrees that there is an Issur D'Oraisa and somebody has to bring a carbon chata. So the Gemara says, who? The one who could have done the whole thing himself, we'll call him the stronger person, or the one who could not do it himself, the weaker person. So the Gemara says, it's the stronger person. He performed the entire activity himself. Rav Chizda explains, the other one doesn't count for anything. He was just hanging on. So Gemara says, well, 1 second. Whoa, I could see the logic the other way. The one who's doing everything himself, he didn't need it to be a two-man job. For him, it's really a one-man job and is being shared. So therefore, it's not considered a normal way of doing it. But the one who couldn't do the whole thing himself, for him, it's a two-man job. So the fact that he was one of two should be a reason to say that he is more chayiv. So the Gemara says, no, that's not how it works. If one person did the whole job and somebody else is just helping, and that help is not needed, it's not significant, it doesn't count for anything. That's Rav Chizda's principle. Somebody who's just helping doesn't count for anything if the other person could do the whole job himself. He says, Misayeya in by mamish, helping doesn't count. And the Gemara now brings 4 proofs to this concept, the first of which is challenged. And the proofs will be from the cases of people or objects standing on multiple legs, where you could have stood on less legs. Do the additional legs count for anything or not? So the halachic issue in the first 2 cases are that of a zav. A zav is metame, anything that he sits upon or anything that he's resting on, and anything underneath that. So here you have the first cases where you have a zav who's sitting on a bed. The bed has 4 legs. Under each leg there's a talis. So the Gemara says each of those 4 legs are needed. A bed can't stand on 3 legs. Therefore, all 4 couldn't do the job on their own. All 4 are needed. So that is the case of a 2-man job, like we said in Hilchos Shabbos, a 2-man job where both people are needed. That's a machlokes Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon. This is also a machlokes Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon, whether all 4 legs count to make the thing under it tamei. According to Rabbi Yehuda, because all of them are needed, all of them become tamei. According to Reb Shimon, because it's a shared job, none of the talisais under the legs become tamei. Okay, we don't have any proof from that yet. The proof is from the next case. What happens if the zav was riding on a cow, let's say, on an animal, and there are talisos under each of the 4 legs. Now, an animal could stand on only 3 legs. So the 4th leg is not really needed. It's just helping. Says the Mishnah, that's the halacha, and each of the 4 legs is not metame the talis that's under it, because on each one you could say it's just helping the other 3. The other 3 could do the job on its own. So you see here clearly that the Rav Chisda is right. If you are helping another person or group which could do the job on your own, what you're doing is insignificant and it doesn't count, and that's why the talis under the leg is tahar. So the Gemara says, hold on a second, not so fast. Maybe there's a different reason here. Maybe we are concerned that what actually happened, we're assuming that what actually happened is that the animal really was holding one of its feet slightly off the ground. So it's not that its leg it wasn't needed, you didn't need it to have that leg. And therefore, since you don't need it, it's not significant. It's because he wasn't really supporting his weight on that leg. He was really supporting his weight on the other leg, the other 3 legs. So the Gemara says that can't be, because in any case where you have somebody shifting his weight around from leg to leg, they should all be tummy. I'll prove it to you from the case of a zav lying on a number of different objects. If he's lying on several benches or on several money wallets, so the halacha is as follows. If he's lying across all of them at once, crosswise, so then he's not matame any of them, because none of them are supporting enough of his weight. If, however, he's lying lengthwise, that means he's lying on one at a time, they're all tummy because he shifts from bench to bench. If he's sleeping, that is. That's if he's awake even. If he's asleep, then even when he's lying crosswise, we're afraid that he shifted to lengthwise, and therefore they are all tummy. The point is that where the zav shifts from bench to bench or from object to object, we're matame all of them because we assume that he shifted onto it at some point, and therefore it was matame. So this animal, if the problem is that he's not necessarily supporting himself on one of the legs, he's holding it in the air, so he probably shifts from leg to leg, and we should therefore be matame all of them. But that's not the halacha. The halacha is that what's under each of them is tahar. Obviously, each leg doesn't count because each leg is not needed. The other 3 legs could have done the job on their own. The first proof. The second proof is from another brisa concerning a zav riding on an animal. It's a Mishnah, actually, and this one says that it depends what he's riding on. If it's a horse, then it's matame what's under its front legs, while if it's a chamor, a donkey, it's matame what's under its back legs. That's because a horse's primary weight is carried on its front legs, and the donkey's primary weight is on its back legs. Now, what about the other legs? What about the legs that don't carry the primary weight? They still help. But it's not matame what's under them. Obviously, what's helping, if you're helping and you're not the main thing, you're not really holding the weight, it doesn't count. Okay, third proof is from a Kohen standing in the Beis HaMikdash. He could only do the avodah if he had both his feet on the floor, if his weight was fully supported on the floor. So the Brisa says, what if he had one foot on the floor and the other foot was on a stone or on a kli or something? So we say as follows. If the foot that's resting on an object is not supporting his weight, and he could have stood just on the other foot, and even if you'll take away this kli and this foot, he'll still remain standing, so then it doesn't count, it's not significant, and the avodah is still kosher because he's being fully supported on the leg which is on the floor. So Mar says, what do you mean? It's definitely helping. Even though it's not holding his weight, it's definitely helping. Obviously helping doesn't count, just like Rav Chisda said. And the last proof is, again, from the Beis HaMikdash, the receiving of the blood in a kli by a carbon had to be performed with the right hand. So what if his left hand was holding along, it was helping out? So as long as if you took the left hand away, the thing wouldn't fall, then it's okay because the right hand is doing the main job. Again, the same thing. The left hand's helping, obviously helping, does not count. Okay, now the Gemara has a new line of questioning, and that is if you have 2 people carrying an object together, and let's say we'll go with the case of where each one could have carried it on his own. It's a one-man job. It was being shared by 2 people, but Reb Meir holds that they are both violating the Issa D'Oraisa anyway. The question is, how much stuff do you need? Do you need a minimum shear for both people, or one minimum shear alone is enough? So the Gemara says it's a machlokes between Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna, whether you need a complete shear for each one, or one shear is enough for both of the one shiur is enough for both of them to share as far as doing the malacha. So the Gemara brings 4 proofs that it's enough to have just one minimum share, and each of them can consider it his own as far as being chayiv. The first one is the Mishnah about the zav sitting on the bed, which we had earlier, and we saw that he's matame the talesios that are under each of the legs. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. An object does not become tame from a zav sitting on it unless it's supporting the majority of his weight. You can't have 4 different talisas, each supporting the majority of the zav's weight. Obviously, they can all share the same majority weight. Second proof that you can all share the same thing is if 2 people shut a door to lock a deer in a house. That's a malacha of trapping, teida. So if they could have each performed it on their own, so then it's not aser, dairaisa. If, however, there was a heavy door, it took 2 people to move, then it is shared Isser Daraisa, they're both chayiv. Now there's only one deer here to trap, so obviously they could each consider the deer their own trapping. You don't need 2 separate animals there. Next, we have halacha that if 2 people steal an ox or a sheep and shecht it, slaughter it together, they have to pay 4 or 5 times as much, 4 for a sheep and 5 for an ox. Now they only shechted 1 sheep, so how come they both have to pay? Obviously, you can both share the same minimum size. And the final proof, the fourth one, is going to be rejected in the end, and this is that you have 2 people who carry a konishel gardi. That's a comb that people used to use to straighten out cloth after they wove it. So that's the minimum size for carrying is enough to straighten 1 sheet of cloth. So the 2 people carried it together, they are each both chayiv. This is obviously Rabbi Huda's opinion. There's obviously Rabbi Meir who says that they're chayiv even if it was a one-man job. So, but over here there's only 1 that they carried. So obviously you don't need 1 share for each of them. So Gemara says, well, not necessarily. First of all, maybe it's a minimum share because if you would burn it, it will be enough to cook 2 eggs. So Gemara says, no, but we're not talking about reeds. It doesn't say reeds. It says a konishel gardi. The minimum size is not enough to burn it. The minimum size is enough to straighten cloth. So Gemara says, okay, well, maybe it was a big one that you could straighten 2 cloths with. So Gemara says, okay, I'll accept that. Fine, we'll reject this particular proof. Now the Gemara has a brisa on the subject. Brisa says if 2 people carry this konishel gardi together, they are potter, and Rabbi Shimon says chayiv. The Gemara says that's backwards. Rabbi Shimon doesn't say you're chayiv if you do anything together, so the Gemara says yes, switch it. The Tanakama's Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv, even though it's 2 people doing a 2-man job, you're chayiv. Because it's 2 people doing a 2-man job, you're chayiv. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, even in a case like that, you are potter. This takes us to the next Mishnah, which discusses what happens when you have a container that contains food. So the container is subservient to the food. It itself is not significant. And therefore, you wouldn't be chayiv, you wouldn't be violating any issur for carrying the container. You're carrying the food. And now if the food is less than the minimum size, you wouldn't be doing any issur at all. And the food is not big enough to be chayiv, and the container is subservient to the food. That is one example. Another example of the same halacha is if you have a bed with a living person on it. So you're not chayiv for carrying the person because of the rule of chayin osi. That's why a person is considered to be carrying himself. You're not chayiv for carrying the bed either because the bed is subservient to the person that's in it. If, however, the person in the bed is mace, he died, so then you're carrying both the person and the bed, and you are certainly violating this deraisa then. And now the Mishnah goes to the minimum size for carrying tumah, and that is you're trying to get rid of tumah so that you don't become tameh from it. The minimum size is the size that is matame you. So for a human corpse, it's a kizayis. For a animal corpse, a nevela, it's also a kizayis. For a sheretz, it's the size of a lentil. Reb Shimon says you're not chayiv in any of these things. Reb Shimon holds this malacha she'ninsuich l'gufa. This is not called carrying. Carrying is where you want something to be somewhere. Here you just want to get rid of it. That concludes the Mishnah. The Gemara now quotes a brisa which says there is one circumstance in which you're carrying food in a container and you are chayiv, you're violating the deraisa for the container as well. And that's if you needed the container in a certain spot. The brisa says if you need the container, you're chayiv for the container also. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. You're telling me that it brings a korban chatas for the food in the container if it's the minimum size and for the container. That means 2 chatos. That means that if you do 2 of the same avera within one period of forgetting that it's also, you're chayiv a separate chatas for each. And that's like if you eat a concise of chaylev and then you eat another concise of chaylev without realizing in between that it's also you're chayav two separate chatayis. So we had thought that wasn't true. The Gemara says no. That the fact that you're chayav a chatas, you're chayav for the container and for the food doesn't mean that you're chayav two chatayis. It could be that you were amazed about the container and therefore you're chayav misa for that, not a chatas. The Gemara says no, that can be. It says you're chayav also on the container. It seems to indicate it's the same type of chayav, two chatayis. The Gemara says, yeah, okay, fine, I'll accept that. But again, it's not a proof, because we had a machlokas earlier in the Masechah Daf I involved between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, where you did the Aveira in the same period of forgetfulness that it's also, but you found out separately that it's also. So maybe this price holds that if you find out separately that it's also, it is two separate chayav chatayis. And that was the case here. You found out separately that carrying the food is asur and carrying the container was asur. This will take us to the conclusion of Daf Tzadi Gimel, and we'll pick it up with Daf Tzadi Daled.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.